When the individual undergoes what is called a spiritual awakening, a great and quiet catastrophe unfolds within. The carefully constructed architecture of the ego, the wants, identities, ambitions, and roles, begins to tremble and in many cases collapses entirely. This is not a mere psychological shift or the result of fatigue or disillusionment. It is a tectonic movement of the psyche, a deep reordering of value and meaning. What once seemed vital, success, recognition, legacy, even self-improvement, now feels strangely hollow. Motivation, which once surged like a river, dries up. But it does not dry up because something has failed. It dries up because the source has been re-evaluated by a deeper intelligence within. The desires that once drove a person are not necessarily evil or misguided. They were, in fact, developmental. Crucial to the earlier stages of becoming, the young psyche needs to pursue, to strive, to build, but these desires are largely tethered to the persona, the mask one wears for the world, and to the ego, which hungers for a sense of control, superiority, and permanence in a world that offers none. Motivation born from this place is always, in some way, an attempt to escape the inner void by filling it with outer achievements. But after awakening, that strategy no longer works. The veil lifts. The individual sees, perhaps for the first time, that the ladder they were climbing rests against a wall that leads nowhere. The hunger remains, but the old food no longer nourishes. What once seemed like purpose is now revealed to be distraction. And here, at this precise juncture, many despair. They speak of losing their drive, of no longer caring, of watching their passions decay into ash. But what they are witnessing is not a collapse. It is a stripping away of illusions. Motivation is not gone, it is being redefined. What dies is the compulsion to perform, to compete, to win affection or status. The fire that once pushed the ego forward now burns differently, more inward, less visible. It ceases to look like ambition and begins to feel like a quiet longing for integration, for inner unity, for truth. The outer world no longer provides the arena for self-distribution. It becomes a mirror reflecting the inner process. In this space, the individual often finds themselves lost. Without ego desire, they do not know what to do, where to go, who to be. And yet it is here, in this groundless ground, that the soul begins its real work. The absence of conventional motivation is not emptiness, but clearing. It is the sacred pause before a more authentic movement arises, one not dictated by fear or pride. To the unawakened eye, it looks like stagnation, but the soul knows what is collapsing is not life, but the false self's attempt to control it. There comes a moment, often after great inner rupture, when the soul begins to withdraw its projections from the outer world. It is not a conscious decision, not a moral choice, but a spontaneous event in the deeper strata of the psyche. That which was once infused with significance, career, romance, power, acclaim, suddenly loses its charm. These things may still exist, but they no longer shine with the same promise. One begins to see them not as sources of fulfillment, but as symbols that once carry the burden of deeper, unconscious longing. The psyche, in its earlier stages, casts the image of the divine outward. It cloaks objects, people, and goals with meaning that properly belongs to the self. We chase love, not merely for connection, but because we sense, however dimly, that it might complete something within us. We seek wealth or beauty or influence, not for their own sake, but because we imagine they will redeem us from some invisible sense of inadequacy. These projections animate our striving. They give color to the world, but they are not the truth. They are a longing for the sacred, misplaced onto temporal things. When the soul awakens, it begins to reclaim these projections. It takes back the sacred energy it had lent to the world, and in doing so, the glitter fades. What remains is often a gray landscape, a life that looks the same on the surface, but no longer moves the heart. It is not that the world has changed, it is that the meaning you painted onto it has been called back into the inner sanctum. This return is deeply disorienting. The emptiness that follows is not the absence of value, but the exposure of illusion. The job title, once a throne, is now a label. The lover, once a savior, is now simply human. The goals that once seemed vital now reveal themselves as attempts to outrun the void within, and so the individual feels unmotivated, even numb. But beneath that numbness is a subtle freedom. For the first time, you are no longer possessed by the compulsive need to seek fulfillment where it cannot be found. The soul is not without desire, but its desire is of a different order. It longs not to possess, but to unite, not to conquer, but to understand. And so it turns inward, not in retreat, but in pilgrimage. The emptiness of the outer world is not a punishment. It is an initiation, a stripping away of false gods, so that something true might be born. This phase cannot be rushed. The soul must fully digest the revelation that the world does not hold what it once promised. Only then does a different kind of vision emerge, one that does not project, but perceives. One that sees the world not as a means to an end, but as a living symbol of the mystery within. After the collapse of projected meaning and the withdrawal of desire from worldly aims, there arises a stillness so profound it often terrifies the mind. This stillness is not peace, not yet. It is emptiness, a hollowing out of the old structures, a silence where once there was striving. And yet this emptiness is not a symptom of failure, nor a void to be quickly filled. It is sacred space, a chamber prepared by the soul for something new, though the ego sees only absence and calls it despair. The modern mind, conditioned to fix, to solve, to move ever forward, meets this emptiness with unease. It will call it depression, lack of motivation, disconnection. It will try to interpret it as a sign that something has gone wrong. But nothing is wrong. Something is unfolding that cannot be understood by the usual categories of success or productivity. The soul is no longer speaking in the language of goals, who is now speaking in silence, in waiting, in dissolution. And this silence must be honored, not bypassed. In this space there is a profound temptation to return to the old patterns, to reattach to desire, to pursue distraction, to construct new idols in the ruins of the old. The ego will whisper that something must be done, that this quiet must be broken. But if you can stay, if you can resist the urge to fix, you will begin to sense a deeper rhythm beneath the stillness. You will see that this emptiness is not nothingness, it is gestation. It is the womb of the new self, not yet born, but forming in the dark. What makes this stage sacred is not its comfort, but its honesty. For once you are not pretending. You are not chasing for the sake of avoiding your own depths. You are simply present to the fact that you do not know who you are anymore, and that this not knowing is essential. You are in the presence of your own becoming. This sacred emptiness strips you of the false, not to punish, but to purify. It removes what was never yours, so that what is truly yours may be seen. But this cannot be rushed. The new self cannot be built with old tools. It must emerge slowly, through listening, through solitude, through the quiet agony of surrender. There is no shortcut. Others may not understand. They will ask what you are doing with your life, why you are not pursuing more, building more, achieving more. They are speaking to the version of you that no longer exists. You are not in the season of production, you are in the season of becoming. And becoming requires space. So let the emptiness be, let it speak, let it burn away what is no longer true, for in that emptiness something vast and ancient is awakening, and when it is ready, it will speak with a voice that is unmistakably your own. When the inner structures begin to shift, and the soul reclaims its authority from the ego, a subtle mourning unfolds within. It is not the mourning of death in the ordinary sense, but the grief of a dethroned sovereign, a ruler who has lost his kingdom. The ego, having governed the psyche for so long, does not step down quietly. It resists. It cries out, it clings to the familiar rituals of control and identity, and as its grasp loosens, confusion arises like smoke from a burned-out temple. The ego had woven the entire map of your life. It decided what mattered, what should be feared, what must be achieved. It built your image in the eyes of others, wrapped your worth in titles and outcomes, and protected you from the chaos of the unconscious by constructing a narrow but navigable world. It believed itself to be the center, and for a time it had to be. But now something deeper has awakened, something older, wiser, and less concerned with appearances, and this deeper presence does not negotiate with the ego's demands. The result is a feeling of profound disorientation. The strategies that once worked no longer yield results. The motivations that once sparked urgency now feel empty. You may still go through the motions, but the energy behind them has faded. It is not that you are incapable. It is that the one who needed to accomplish, to impress, to dominate, he is dying, and death, even of the false self, is never without pain. The ego grieves its fading relevance. It sees the soul's silence as abandonment. It sees stillness as laziness, surrender as failure, but these are only the distorted perceptions of a part of you that cannot yet see the greater pattern. The ego does not understand the language of the soul. It wants direction, clarity, movement. It wants to fix the emptiness, to re-establish order. But the path you are now on is not one that can be grasped through will alone. During this morning, many feel lost. Not because they are off course, but because they are no longer being guided by the old compass. The sense of purpose tied to ego-driven ambition evaporates, and without it, life may seem to lack coherence. But this incoherence is part of the process. The house is being dismantled so a temple may rise in its place. You are not directionless. You are being reoriented towards something truer, something that comes not from the surface, but from the depths. The ego's mourning is not to be rejected or suppressed. It must be witnessed with compassion. Let it weep, let it rage, let it tell its stories of loss and failure. But do not mistake its cries for truth. The real self does not need to be important. It does not need recognition. It only needs to be whole. In time, the ego will learn a new role, not as master, but as servant. But before it can serve, it must grieve the end of its reign. That grief is not the end of the journey, it is in fact the beginning of something real. When the self awakens, truly awakens, it no longer moves toward the world with outstretched hands, begging for affirmation. It no longer seeks to be seen, applauded, or defined. It turns instead toward the one thing that cannot be bought, borrowed, or bestowed: truth. And not truth as an idea or doctrine, but as a living presence that waits quietly beneath all masks, beneath all striving, beneath the machinery of personality that once ran the show. The unawakened self is obsessed with reflection. It wants to know how it is seen, how it measures up, how it compares. It builds a life as one builds a monument, stone by stone, with careful attention to how it will appear from the outside. It does not matter whether the materials are genuine. What matters is that it stands tall and gleams in the right light. Achievement, success, recognition, these are the offerings it makes to the gods of worthiness. They are substitutes for essence. But when awakening begins, all of this starts to crumble. The self turns away from the external mirrors, not out of pride, but out of fatigue. It has tasted enough of validation to know it is never enough. The applause fades, the milestones lose meaning, and in the silence that follows, the self hears something it had never noticed before, the subtle, insistent call to return to what is real. The new axis, not truth that flatters, or the truth curd. The new, eluded, is its sate, the whole, not express, not a pilly, not a comfort. It is not killing, abandon. It does not ask if you are liked. It asks if you are whole. This shift is often misunderstood. To the outside world, the awakened self may appear less driven, less ambitious, even indifferent. But that is because the fire that once burned outward has turned inward. It is no longer used to chase goals, it is used to burn away illusion. What was once energy spent on building an image is now devoted to inner clarity, to deep integration, to reconciling the fractured parts of the psyche. This is not passivity, it is a different kind of courage, the courage to let go of everything that is not aligned with truth, the courage to speak when silence would be more convenient, the courage to remain still when action would bring praise. The awakened self is not interested in climbing ladders, it is interested in dissolving them entirely. There is no longer a need to prove. The awakened one does not ask, "Who will see me?" but rather, "What is true here, regardless of who sees it?" And in that sacred solitude, free from performance, something extraordinary occurs. The self becomes real, not ideal, not admired, but undeniably and irrevocably real. To those still bound to the world of striving and surface, your stillness after awakening may appear as withdrawal, laziness, or even apathy. They do not see the fire that now burns in a place no eye can observe. They are looking for motion, for ambition, for the familiar signals of purpose, the hustle, the performance, the chase. When they do not see these, they assume you have given up, but they are mistaking outer silence for inner emptiness, not knowing that a deep reordering is taking place beneath the surface. In the earlier stages of life, energy flows outward. The world is a field of conquest. Identity is shaped by doing, and meaning is constructed through achievement. In that state, stillness is foreign, suspicious, even dangerous. It is equated with inertia or defeat. But stillness after awakening is not defeat. It is descent. The descent into the hidden layers of the self, where truth is no longer found in speed or visibility, but in authenticity and alignment with something far older than the ego. You are not passive, you are listening. You are not disengaged, you are reorienting. But because the outer markers of progress are absent, others will not understand. They will ask what you're doing with your life, why you're not moving forward, why your fire seems to have gone out. What they do not realize is that the fire has simply changed direction. It now illuminates the inner world. It burns not to impress or to perform, but to expose, to purify, to reveal what is real. This misunderstanding is inevitable. We live in a culture that reveres noise, motion, and productivity. The idea that depth might be found in slowness, that transformation could come through quiet rather than action, is foreign to most. And so your silence will be interpreted through their lens, not yours. They will see decline where there is deepening. They will see confusion where there is clarity. They will see disengagement where there is sacred solitude. There may be loneliness in this, not because you are truly alone, but because what you are becoming is no longer legible to the world you once inhabited. You are crossing a threshold that many never even approach, a movement from persona to essence. An essence does not perform, it simply is. It does not explain itself. It does not market itself. It radiates quietly, like a star that no longer needs to shine brighter, because it has discovered the source of its own light. In this space, the opinions of others fall away, not because you reject them in bitterness, but because you no longer need them to reflect you back to yourself. The stillness that others misread as apathy is the soil in which your truest self is rooting. It does not require validation, only presence. Let them misunderstand if they must, for you are no longer seeking to be understood, you are seeking to be whole. When the false structures have fallen, when the ambitions of the ego have burned themselves out and the soul has reclaimed its authority, a new form of movement begins to stir. So subtle, it is almost imperceptible. This is not the motivation of the outer world. It does not roar, does not announce itself, does not seek reward. It arises like a whisper from the depths, born not of lack, but of inner necessity. It is not compelled by fear of insignificance, nor by the hope of validation. It is compelled by the quiet urgency of becoming what one truly is. In the old life, motivation was largely reaction. One reacted to expectations, to competition, to the hunger for recognition or safety. The outer world dictated the terms of engagement. Be more, do more, prove yourself. It was a game of mirrors, with the self constantly adjusting, striving, performing. What looked like purpose was often compensation. What looked like drive was often anxiety, wearing ambition as a mask. But after awakening, something changes. The demands of the world grow distant, like echoes from another room. They may still be heard, but they no longer command obedience. The awakened self has discovered a different axis, one that turns not on approval, but on authenticity. And from this axis, a new kind of motivation is born. One that is quiet, deliberate, and deeply rooted in the unseen. This inner motivation does not follow the linear path. It does not concern itself with whether the world is watching. It does not hurry, nor does it compete. It listens, it waits, it acts only when there is a resonance between inner truth and outer opportunity. And when it does move, it moves with a sense of alignment that was once unimaginable. There is no rush to arrive. The journey itself becomes the expression of the self. To those still operating under the old code, this new way of being may look like disinterest or delay, but it is neither. It is devotion of the highest order, not to outcome, but to integrity. You are no longer chasing a life. You are allowing one to emerge. The work you now do, the relationships you now engage in, the choices you now make, they are not made to fill a void, but to express the fullness that has begun to take form within. True motivation after awakening is not about accumulation, it is about revelation. It is about uncovering what has always been there, buried beneath layers of adaptation and noise. And as this deeper self comes forward, you find that the work which once felt like obligation now becomes offering. The life that once felt like performance now becomes participation in something sacred. Nothing need be forced. What is truly yours will call to you. And when it does, you will respond, not with frantic effort, but with quiet clarity. Not to escape yourself, but to embody yourself. This is the new movement, and it comes not from the outer world's demand, but from the soul's remembrance. And so, what appears from the outside as loss, stillness, or apathy is in truth a profound reorientation of the self. The old motivations, the hunger for identity, approval, success, must fall away, not as failures, but as necessary offerings to the deeper movement of becoming. In their place arises something quieter, but infinitely more enduring, a life lived from within, aligned not with what the world demands, but with what the soul. This path is not glamorous, it is not loud, it does not guarantee applause, but it is real. And in a world so full of noise and performance, to live from the center of your being, to move only when something true calls you, is the most radical act of all. Let others misunderstand, let the outer world rush by. You are no longer chasing shadows. You are becoming whole.